Exists in the South Carolina Historical Society archives a sealed document dated March 1847, marked with a warning that still chills researchers who discover it. Contains testimony too disturbing for public record. May God forgive what men have done. Inside those yellowed pages lies the testimony of 8 plantation owners who suffered identical horrific injuries over a span of 11 years. Each man castrated with surgical precision, each attack occurring within 24 hours of a specific, unspeakable act. The first incident occurred on a humid night in August 1836, though its full significance wouldn't be understood until much later. The victim was Nathaniel Grayson, a 32-year-old plantation owner whose property bordered the Rutledge estate. Grayson was found in his bedroom at dawn by his wife, conscious but in shock, blood soaking through the bedsheets. He had been castrated with what the doctor who treated him described as almost surgical precision. The bedroom door had been locked from the inside. The windows were shuttered and latched. There was no sign of forced entry, no evidence of struggle beyond the injury itself. Grayson, when he could speak, claimed he had woken to a hand over his mouth, a flash of metal, and pain so intense he lost consciousness. He saw nothing, heard nothing except breathing, steady, controlled breathing. The local sheriff, Benjamin Carr, investigated with the assistance of the slave patrol. Every enslaved person on Grayson's plantation was interrogated. Several were whipped on suspicion, a common practice designed more to reassert control than to extract information. Nothing useful emerged. Watching without comment. The Rutledge plantation, like others in the region, operated on a task system rather than gang labor. Enslaved workers were assigned specific tasks each day, a certain amount of rice to thresh, a field to hoe, ditches to dig, and once completed, their time was theoretically their own. In practice, tasks were often impossible to complete within daylight hours, forcing people to work late into the evening. But the system did allow for small pockets of autonomy, gardens where enslaved people grew their own food, opportunities to earn tiny amounts of money by selling surplus produce or fish caught in rivers. These small freedoms were crucial for psychological survival, creating spaces where people could exercise choice, however limited. Silas, according to oral histories, used his evening hours differently than most. He watched. He listened. His silence made people forget he was there, and in that invisibility, he learned things. He learned the patterns of the overseers, which ones drank heavily, which ones disappeared into the quarters at night. He learned the schedules of the patrol riders, the gaps in their routes. He learned which plantation owners visited other plantations, and why. And he learned, though no one spoke of it openly, which men among the enslavers considered enslaved women and sometimes enslaved boys as sexual property, a right that came with ownership. What happened when the truth finally came out? They arrested Silas immediately, shackled him with irons on his wrists and ankles, locked him in a storage shed on the Caldwell plantation while they decided what to do. Caldwell was taken to Charleston for emergency medical treatment. He survived, like all the previous victims, but the injury was catastrophic and permanent. News of the attack spread rapidly through the Low Country, and for the first time, the authorities began to seriously investigate whether this might be connected to the previous incidents. Sheriff Carr, who had been investigating these attacks for more than a decade, traveled immediately to the Caldwell plantation. For the first time, he had an actual suspect in custody. The interrogation began the following day, March 26, 1847. In a small room in the Georgetown courthouse where Silas had been transferred under heavy guard. Present were Sheriff Carr, 2 deputies, the district attorney, and Reverend Clayton, who had been summoned at Carr's request because he was known to have the trust of enslaved people and might be able to get Silas to communicate despite his inability to speak. The interrogation transcript, part of the sealed documents later archived by the South Carolina Historical Society, makes for disturbing reading. Silas was brought in chains into the room, his hands shackled to a ring bolted into the floor. He sat without resistance, his face showing no expression, his damaged throat making occasional involuntary sounds, but no words. Sheriff Carr began with direct questions. Did you attack Jonathan Caldwell? Did you castrate him? Silas nodded slowly to both questions. No denial, no attempt to escape responsibility. Then Carr asked the question that mattered. Have you done this before? Are you responsible for the other attacks? Silas stared at him for a long moment, then nodded again. The men in the room exchanged glances. They had suspected, but confirmation was different. Carr pressed further. How many men have you attacked? Silas held up both hands, fingers spread. 8. Carr felt something cold settle in his stomach. Why did you do this? It was Reverend Clayton who intervened then. He had brought paper and pencil, thinking Silas might be able to write. But when he offered them, Silas shook his head. He couldn't read or write. Literacy was illegal for enslaved people, and he had never been taught. So Clayton tried a different approach. He began asking yes or no questions, and Silas responded with nods or headshakes. The conversation that followed, reconstructed from Clayton's journal and the official transcript, revealed the pattern that had been there all along, hidden by shame and silence. Did these men hurt you? Clayton asked. Silas nodded. Did they force themselves upon you? Silas's nod was slower this time, but definite. All 8 of them? Nod. Did this happen to you when you were young, when your voice was damaged? Nod. And it continued to happen whenever you were sent to work on other plantations? Nod. Clayton turned to look at Sheriff Carr. Sheriff, I believe we need to investigate the circumstances under which these attacks occurred. I believe this man has been subjected to systematic sexual violence for nearly 20 years, and what he did was retaliation. The room fell silent. The district attorney, a man named Harrison Felder, finally spoke. That's not a defense under law, Reverend. Slaves have no legal right to retaliate against their masters for any reason, even if what you suggest is true, and I'm not conceding that it is.